The furious encounter, the air inside docking bay 17 was hot and heavy. Filled with the smell of burnt fuel and coolant, Ethan Cross had been working for hours on the broken cargo shuttle. His hands stained with grease and his shirt sticking. To his back, he had no idea that in the next few minutes his life was going to change forever. The steady hum of the spaceport was broken by a sound that made even the toughest workers freeze a deep, sharp roar that echoed through the metal walls. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't an alarm. It was a voice, an alien voice, and it was filled with fury. The crowd in the bay parted quickly, like water pushed aside by a massive ship. Through the gap stepped a tall figure, her steps loud and heavy, her armor shining under the overhead lights. She was a Vel'Ra warrior, one of the most feared species in this sector. Her long silver hair swung behind her, but what caught Ethan's eyes was her tail long, sleek, and moving in sharp, angry flicks. Every flick was like the warning of a predator ready to strike. Her face was sharp and beautiful in a dangerous way, her eyes glowing faintly with an inner light. People whispered her name, but Ethan couldn't hear it clearly. He was too focused on the fact that she was walking directly toward him. He didn't even know why until it happened. Ethan turned with a heavy tool in his hand, not seeing her until it was too late. He stepped right into her path. The heavy canister of coolant he was carrying tipped in his grip, spilling its freezing liquid over her armored boots. For a moment, there was silence. Then she roared, the sound hitting him like a physical force. "You dare!" She shouted, her voice so strong that his chest vibrated from it. The entire docking bay seemed to hold its breath. Ethan blinked, still trying to figure out what he had done wrong. Around him, workers and traders were already backing away, muttering about the stupid human who was about to die. No one touched a Vel'Ra when they were angry. No one even stood too close. And yet, here Ethan was face to face with one. She stepped closer, her tail whipping dangerously, her hand curling into a fist. Most people would have begged for forgiveness. Most would have run. But Ethan wasn't most people. He had been in tight spots before, on planets where a wrong word could get you shot. And maybe it was the heat, maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was something else entirely. But instead of stepping back, he smirked. And before he could think about the consequences, he reached out and grabbed her tail. It was warm and smooth under his hand, with a faint pulse he could feel through his fingers. The moment his skin touched it, the world seemed to stop. The air around them changed. The Vel'Ra warrior froze in place, her sharp glare fading into something unreadable. The crowd gasped, the sound sharp and collective. Ethan's grip loosened slightly, expecting her to hit him, break his arm, or worse, but she didn't. She just stood there, looking at him with wide, stunned eyes. "Do you?" Her voice was lower now, almost a whisper. "Do you understand what you just did?" Ethan shook his head slowly, unsure if speaking would make things better or worse. She took a step closer, her gaze locked on his face, as if searching for something. "You touched my tail," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Only my bonded can do that." Ethan frowned. Bonded? Her eyes narrowed again, but the fire of pure rage wasn't there anymore. "It means you've just started a rite that cannot be undone," she said. Ethan glanced around. Most of the crowd was gone now, scattered into the side corridors, leaving the bay almost empty. The few who remained were watching with wide eyes, whispering in shock, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, human," she continued, "but you've just tied yourself to me in a way you can't even imagine." Before Ethan could ask what that meant, she grabbed his wrist, her grip strong enough to make him wince. "Come with me," she said, pulling him toward the back of the docking bay. "Wait, hey. I have work," he started, but she didn't slow down. Her pace was fast, her tail now twitching in a way that felt less angry and more tense. They moved through a narrow maintenance corridor, the sound of their boots echoing off the metal walls. Ethan felt the eyes of people they passed, workers and aliens alike, all looking at him with disbelief. Finally, they stopped in a dimly lit storage room. Far from the noise of the spaceport, she let go of his wrist and turned to face him fully. "You don't even know my name," she said, "yet you've done something that binds our lives together." Ethan leaned against a crate, trying to catch his breath. "Well, Tay, maybe you should start with your name," he said, his voice still calm. She hesitated for a long moment, then spoke, "Kyra Vel'Ra." She said quietly, "Warrior of the Vel'Ra High Clans." Ethan had heard of the Vel'Ra clans. They were powerful, ruthless, and proud. He had also heard they didn't forgive insults. And yet, here he was, still breathing. Kyra stepped closer again, her voice low but firm. "From this moment on, you are part of something dangerous, human," she said. "The bonding rite has begun." Ethan had no idea what that meant, but something in her eyes told him that whatever it was, his life would never be the same again. The reaction no one expected. Ethan stood there, staring at Kyra Vel'Ra, trying to process her words. The bonding rite, whatever it was, sounded serious. But the fact that she hadn't killed him yet was more surprising than the strange term itself. Her tail swayed slowly behind her now, no longer whipping like before. Her eyes, still glowing faintly, scanned his face as if searching for a hidden truth. "Do you have any idea what you've started, human?" she asked again, her voice softer this time. Ethan gave a slow shake of his head. "Nope, not a clue," he replied, trying to sound casual. Her expression tightened, though not with anger, more like worry. "This is no joke," she said, stepping closer until he could see the faint lines of alien symbols etched into her armor. "In my culture, touching a Vel'Ra's tail is sacred, dangerous, and binding," she continued. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Binding? How? Like a contract?" Her eyes narrowed, much deeper. She said, "It's a connection between souls, between instincts, between lives." He let out a short laugh, though it sounded more nervous than amused. "Well, that's a lot for a first meeting," he muttered. Kyra didn't laugh. Instead, she took a deep breath. "If anyone saw what you did, and they didn't, you're now tied to me in the eyes of my people." Ethan tilted his head. "Tied like?" She cut him off. "Bonded, human, bonded," before he could speak again. A loud, echoing bang rattled the walls of the storage room. Kyra's head snapped toward the sound, her posture instantly shifting into combat readiness. Ethan glanced at the door. "Friends of yours?" Her eyes hardened. "Not friends," she said. "Hunters, without warning." She grabbed his wrist again. "We need to move, now." Ethan stumbled after her as she pushed open a side hatch leading into a narrow maintenance tunnel. The light was dim, the walls lined with pipes that hissed with bursts of steam. He could hear footsteps behind them, heavy, deliberate, and too many to count. Kyra moved fast, her tail swaying just enough for him to notice that it no longer felt hostile. They turned a sharp corner, and she slowed just enough to press him against the wall. "Listen," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Those mercenaries were sent by my own clan." Ethan blinked. "Your clan? Why are they after you?" "Because I broke the High Clan's code," she said, her eyes flicking toward the sound of the approaching footsteps. "And now that you touched my tail, they'll see you as an accomplice." Ethan sighed. "Great. I just love making new enemies." Kyra ignored his sarcasm. Pulling him further down the tunnel, they emerged into a lower docking level. The air here thick with the smell of oil and rust. Kyra scanned the area, then motioned toward a small service lift at the far end. But before they could reach it, 3 armored figures stepped out from behind a stack of crates, weapons raised. Ethan froze, but Kyra didn't. In a blur of movement, she stepped forward. her tail whipping behind her as she disarmed the first attacker with a twist of his wrist. The second fired, but she spun low, dragging Ethan down with her as the plasma shot scorched the wall above. Ethan's heart pounded, the heat from the blast washing over him. The third mercenary charged, and Kyra slammed her armored elbow into his chest, sending him crashing into a cargo container within seconds. All three were on the floor, groaning but alive. Ethan stared, wide-eyed. "Remind me never to make you angry." Kyra gave him a sharp look. "You already did," she said. "And now look where we are." They slipped into the lift, the doors closing just as more footsteps echoed in the distance. As the lift rattled upward, Ethan glanced at her. "So what happens if this bonding rite is completed?" Kira's gaze held his for a moment before she looked away. "Our senses link," she said. "Our thoughts, our pain, our instincts, even our heartbeat." Ethan raised a brow that sounds invasive. "It is survival," she replied simply. "In battle, two bonded warriors can fight as one." Without words, without hesitation, Ethan leaned against the lift wall. "So, I pulled your tail, and now I'm stuck in a warrior marriage." Kyra's lips curved in the faintest smirk. Something like that. The lift stopped with a jerk, and the doors opened to reveal a quiet corridor lined with storage lockers. Kyra moved quickly to one of them. Entering a code before pulling out a small metallic case, she handed it to Ethan. "Carry this." "What is it?" he asked, taking the surprisingly heavy case. "A key," she said simply, "to our escape." Before he could ask more, a voice boomed through the corridor, speaking in the Vel'Ra language. Kyra's eyes darkened. "They found us." She spun toward the far door. "Run," she ordered. Ethan didn't argue. Sprinting after her as the sound of armored boots grew louder behind them, they burst into an open hangar bay, the glare of the space beyond spilling through the force field barrier. In the center sat a sleek, black fighter ship design, unlike anything Ethan had seen before. Kyra ran to it, motioning for him to follow. The mercenaries were close, now their shouts echoing off the metal walls. Ethan clutched the case, his heart racing as Kyra powered up the ship. The engines roared to life, the sound drowning out the noise of their pursuers. She looked over her shoulder, eyes locking with his. "From this point on," she said, "your life is tied to mine, whether you like it or not." Ethan gave a half smile. "Guess I better start liking it." The hatch closed, sealing them inside, and the ship lifted from the hangar floor. Through the cockpit glass, Ethan watched the spaceport shrink away as stars filled the view. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew one thing: this was no ordinary escape. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous and far more personal. Escape through the underbelly. The fighter ship shot out of the hangar like a black arrow, leaving the noise of the mercenaries far behind. Ethan gripped the side of his seat, feeling the sudden pull as the ship angled hard to the left. Kyra's hands moved across the controls with speed and precision, her glowing eyes fixed on the swirling space ahead. They weaved between cargo freighters, patrol drones, the long steel arms of the spaceport's docking stations. A loud voice crackled over the comm, ordering them to halt for inspection. Kyra ignored it completely, her jaw set and her tail twitching with focus. Ethan glanced at the radar screen and saw several small blips moving toward them fast. "They're coming after us," he said. "I know," Kyra replied, her tone calm but sharp. "We can't stay in open space. They'll catch us in minutes." She pulled hard on the controls, diving the fighter down toward the massive skeletal frame beneath the spaceport. Ethan's stomach lurched as the ship plunged into a maze of steel beams, maintenance tunnels, and shadowy corridors lit only by scattered hazard lights. "This is the underbelly," Kyra explained quickly. "A labyrinth no outsider dares to enter." Ethan smirked nervously. "Lucky for us, I'm not an outsider anymore, right?" Kyra shot him a quick glance. "You're only alive because of the Bondome mistake that for safety." The ship threaded through a narrow gap between two giant cargo arms, sparks flying as the wingtips scraped metal from behind. The pursuing ships followed, but their movements were clumsy in the tight space. Kyra made a sudden roll, slipping through an opening that looked far too small for a fighter. Ethan swore under his breath, clutching the metallic case he still carried. "What's in this thing that's so important?" he asked again. Kyra didn't answer immediately, her focus still on the twisting path ahead. Finally, she said, "Inside is a star map, one that shows routes through the shattered belt." Ethan frowned. "Never heard of it. You?" "Will," she said grimly, "it's the only place in this system where my clan won't follow us." A flash of plasma fire lit up the narrow tunnel behind them, forcing Kyra to bank sharply. The pursuing ship scraped the wall, spinning out before exploding in a burst of light. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Kyra didn't slow down, pushing the fighter deeper into the underbelly's maze. They passed through sections where the walls were covered in frost, where leaking coolant had frozen into jagged shapes. Other sections were filled with steam, clouds swirling around them like ghosts. "Why are they so desperate to catch you?" Ethan asked. Kyra's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "Because I refused to kill someone." Ethan turned to her. "That's it? You refused?" She nodded once. "The High Clans ordered me to assassinate a human diplomata. Man who once saved my life during a border conflict." Ethan stared at her, realizing this warrior who had terrified the entire docking bay had also defied her own people out of loyalty. Before he could say more, Kyra's eyes narrowed. "Hold on," she warned. The tunnel ahead opened into a massive chamber where old cargo platforms hung suspended in zero gravity. She spun the fighter sideways, sliding between two of them. With barely a meter of space on either side, two enemy ships tried to follow, but collided with each other, bursting into fragments. "That's 3 down," Kyra said coldly. Ethan grinned despite himself. "I'm starting to enjoy this." "Don't," she replied sharply. "We're not out yet." As they neared the far exit of the chamber, Ethan noticed the walls narrowing again, the passage ahead choked with twisted steel. Kyra slowed just enough to guide the ship through, the hull scraping against the metal. The fighter emerged into a dim maintenance bay with half its lights dead. Kyra cut the engines, letting the ship drift behind a pile of derelict drones. "They'll lose our trail here," she whispered. Ethan listened for the sound of engines, but only silence filled the bay. "Why here?" he asked quietly. "This place is abandoned," she said. "But there's an old supply tunnel that leads out to free space. Only small ships can fit through it." She rose from her seat, motioning for him to follow. Ethan grabbed the case and climbed out, his boots clanging on the metal floor. The bay smelled of dust and machine oil, and every step echoed through the emptiness. Kyra moved toward a rusted control panel on the far wall, her tail swaying with purpose. She tapped a sequence on the controls, and with a deep groan, a section of the floor slid open, revealing a narrow shaft leading downward. "This is it," she said. "Once we're through, the only path left is the shattered belt." Ethan peered down into the dark shaft. "Looks cozy," he muttered, before Kyra could respond. A faint clatter echoed from somewhere above. Her head snapped up, eyes glowing brighter. "They found us," she hissed. In the distance, the whine of engines grew louder. "Go," she ordered, shoving him toward the shaft. Ethan didn't argue. Climbing down the metal rungs as fast as he could, Kyra followed close behind, her boots making barely a sound. The shaft opened into a cramped tunnel where their voices sounded too loud at the far end. A faint blue light marked the exit. Ethan moved toward it, but Kyra suddenly grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered, pulling him into the shadows, through the light ahead. He could see movement, 3 figures in armor, blocking the exit. Kyra's voice was low and calm. "Stay behind me," she said, her hand moving to the hilt. Of the blade strapped to her hip, Ethan tightened his grip on the case. His pulse quickening. He didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain: if they didn't get past those guards, their journey to the shattered belt would end before it began. The bond deepens. The dim tunnel smelled of metal and damp air, the faint blue light at the far end casting long shadows across the walls. Ethan could see the 3 armored figures standing at the exit, their weapons ready, their stances firm. Kyra's tail twitched slowly behind her, a sign Ethan was starting to recognize not anger, but focus. She turned her head slightly, speaking in a low voice, "When I move, stay close." Ethan's grip tightened on the metallic case. Close as in right behind you, or close as in don't breathe without your permission. Her lips curved in the faintest smirk. "Both," she said. Without another word, she moved, her body a blur in the narrow space. The first guard barely had time to lift his weapon before Kyra slammed into him, her armored shoulder knocking the air from his lungs. Ethan ducked as a shot burned the air above his head. Kyra's blade flashed in the blue light, striking the second guard's weapon and sending it spinning to the floor. The third guard stepped forward, swinging a heavy staff, but Kyra twisted low, sweeping his legs out from under him. In less than 10 seconds, the tunnel was silent. Again, the guards lay groaning, their weapons scattered. Kyra didn't waste time. She grabbed Ethan's arm and pulled him toward the exit. The blue light grew brighter as they stepped into the open. Outside, the tunnel opened onto a narrow cliff of jagged rock, overlooking the deep void of space. Below them, a small maintenance skiff was docked, its engines cold. "This is our way out," Kyra said, already moving toward it. Ethan followed, glancing back at the tunnel where the guards still lay. "You sure they won't get up and follow?" he asked. Kyra didn't slow. "They will, but by then, we'll be gone." They climbed into the skiff, and Kyra moved to the controls, her fingers flying over the old, worn panels. The engines coughed to life, sending vibrations through the metal floor. As they lifted away from the cliff, Ethan looked out the small viewport, watching the blue glow fade behind them. For the first time since this all began, there was a moment of quiet. Ethan broke it. "So, this bonding, right? How exactly does it work?" Kyra glanced at him, her eyes softer than before. "It's not something I've ever explained to a human." "Well," Ethan said, "never had my hand on a Vel'Ra tail before. So I guess we're both new to this." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment before she looked away. "When you touched my tail," she said slowly, "it wasn't just an insult or a bold act. It activated something in me. A genetic trigger we call the link." Ethan leaned back in his seat. "And the link does. It binds our senses." She said, "I can feel your heartbeat right now. I can sense your emotions, your fear, your curiosity." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You can read my mind." Her lips curved faintly again. "Not exactly, but close enough." He thought about that for a moment, then asked, "So does this go both ways? Can I feel what you feel?" She hesitated, then nodded. "In time, yes, if the link grows stronger." Ethan looked out the viewport again, watching the dark stretch of space ahead. "That's intense," he said quietly. Kyra didn't reply, but her tail moved in a slow, steady rhythm. They traveled in silence for a while, the hum of the skiff's engines filling the space. Ethan could feel something strange, a faint thrum in the back of his mind, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He realized it was hers when Kyra spoke again. Her voice was quieter, almost thoughtful. "Most bonds are formed between warriors of the same clan," she said. "They fight together, live together, die together." Ethan glanced at her. "Sounds permanent." "It is," she said simply. Before Ethan could say more, the skiff's sensors beeped sharply. Kyra's expression hardened. They found us. Ethan looked at the screen too. Small blips were approaching fast. Kira angled the skiff toward a distant cluster of dark shapes floating in space. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "The edge of the shattered belt," she said. "If we reach it, we'll disappear from their scanners." The pursuing ships grew larger in the viewport, their weapons glowing faintly. Ethan's pulse quickened, and Kira glanced at him. "I can feel your fear," she said, her tone calm. "Use it. Fear sharpens the senses." He tried to focus, watching as Kira threaded the skiff between two massive chunks of rock, drifting slowly in the void. The pursuing ships fired, but their shots hit the asteroids instead, sending fragments spinning away. Kira moved like she was part of the ship, every adjustment smooth and precise. Ethan realized this was the bond at work. She didn't have to explain what she was doing. He could almost predict her moves. They dove into a narrow gap between two spinning asteroids, the skiff scraping so close that Ethan could hear the grind of rock against metal. The enemy ships hesitated before following, giving Kira the chance to slip deeper into the belt. When they finally emerged into a pocket of open space surrounded by jagged rock walls, Kira cut the engines, letting them drift. "They'll pass us by," she said, her voice low. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're good at this," he admitted. Kyra's gaze flicked to him, and for a moment there was something softer in her eyes. "Good thing for you," she said, "because now you're part of it." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess there are worse people to be bonded to." Her tail swayed once, slow and deliberate. And for the first time since they met, she didn't correct him. The battle in Orbitha skiff drifted in the shadow of the jagged rocks, silent and still. Ethan could hear only the low hum of the standby systems and the steady sound of his own breathing. Kira sat in the pilot seat, eyes fixed on the sensor display, her tail coiled around the base of the chair like a tense spring. The two enemy ships slid past on the scanner, searching the belt's twisted corridors for them. Ethan held his breath, afraid even the sound of air might give them away. "They're sweeping the area," Kira whispered. "If they don't find us in 30 seconds, they'll move on." But the ships didn't move on. Instead, one slowed, its scanners flashing bright across the asteroid walls. "They've got something," Ethan said quietly. Kyra's eyes narrowed. "Then we move." Her hands danced over the controls, and the skiff's engines flared to life. The sudden burst of light from the exhaust lit the rock walls, giving away their position instantly. The enemy ships turned sharply, their weapons glowing with a charge of incoming fire. Kira shoved the throttle forward, and the skiff leaped ahead. Bolts of plasma streaked past, smashing into the asteroids and sending shards spinning into the darkness. Ethan gripped the metallic case tight, the vibrations of each near-miss rattling through his bones. The skiff twisted between two narrow rock spires, the hull scraping close enough to leave sparks in their wake. Kira's movements were sharp and precise, her eyes scanning for any path that could break the enemy's pursuit. "They're faster than us," Ethan said, glancing at the rear display. "They're also heavier," Kira replied. "If we keep weaving, they'll struggle." To keep up in the belt, she spun the skiff hard to the right, slipping under a massive floating slab of rock. The pursuing ships followed, firing wildly, their shots carving molten scars into the stone. One blast was too close. It struck the skiff's left wing, sending the ship rolling hard. Ethan's stomach lurched, and he grabbed the side rail to keep from hitting the floor. Kira steadied the ship with a grunt. "We can't take another hit like that." Ethan leaned forward. "Then what's the plan?" Kyra's eyes flicked to the asteroid map on her console. "We lead them into the maw." Ethan frowned. "That doesn't sound friendly." "It's not," she said simply, "but it's the only way." The maw was a swirling cluster of rocks locked in a gravitational whirlpool. Anything that entered risked being smashed to pieces or pulled into the small, dark moon at its center. Kira dove toward it without hesitation. The enemy ships still on their tail. The swirling field of debris closed around them, massive. Chunks of rock spinning in unpredictable patterns. Kyra and Ethan moved together now. She didn't have to tell him when to brace. When to shift weight, when to duck. The bond carried those instincts between them. Plasma fire flashed again. This time, missing by meters as Kyra dipped under a tumbling boulder the size of a building. The enemy ships weren't so lucky. One clipped a spinning shard of rock, its shields flaring before collapsing completely. It spiraled out of control, vanishing into the Maw's chaos. "That's one down," Ethan said. "Focus, Kyra." Snapped, "The other is still here." The second ship was relentless. Firing short, controlled bursts, Kyra banked left. Weaving through a narrow split in the rocks, the enemy followed. Closing the gap, Ethan's pulse matched the steady thrum he could feel in the back of his mind. Kyra's iced heartbeat. He could sense her tension, her focus, and the sudden sharp spike of an idea forming. Without a word, she flipped the skiff upside down, using the pull of a drifting asteroid to sling them into a sharp loop. The enemy ship overshot them, flying directly into their sights. "Hold on," Kira said. She fired the skiff's cannons, the blasts slamming into the enemy's rear thrusters. The ship jolted, spinning out of control, and smashed into a massive chunk of rock, erupting into a ball of fire. The debris drifted away slowly. Carried by the Maw's pull, the skiff leveled out, the hum of the engines steady again. Ethan let out a long breath. "I can't believe that worked." Kyra allowed herself the faintest smile. Neither can they. The Maw's pull began to tug at them, and Kyra angled the skiff toward a thin gap in the swirling rocks. They shot out into open space, the stars stretching endlessly. Ahead, for a moment, there was silence, no pursuit, no blaster fire, only the quiet hum of travel. Ethan leaned back in his seat, feeling the sweat cooling on his skin. "That was insane," he said. "And maybe a little fun." Kyra glanced at him. "Careful, human. You're starting to sound like a Vel'Ra," he chuckled, but the sound faded as he remembered the metallic case in his hands. He looked at her seriously. "So this star map does really worth all this?" Kyra's gaze shifted to the stars ahead. "It's more than a map, it's a key to freedom." Ethan studied her face, the way her expression softened for just a moment before the warrior mask returned. He didn't know exactly what she meant, but he was starting to understand that whatever lay ahead in the shattered belt wasn't just about survival, it was about something far bigger. And now, because of one reckless moment in a docking bay, he was part of it. The shattered belt stretched before them like the broken bones of some ancient giant. Massive chunks of rock floated in the dark, turning slowly in the light of distant suns. Some were no bigger than a small house, others as large as entire cities. Between them drifted clouds of glittering dust, glowing faintly in the darkness. Ethan stared through the viewport, feeling the weight of the sight settle in his chest. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. Kira's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. And deadly, she eased the skiff forward, weaving between two jagged asteroids that passed each other with only meters to spare. "This place swallows fleets," she continued, "and never gives them back." Ethan glanced at the radar, which showed dozens of moving blips, some large, some small. "All of these are rocks?" he asked. Kyra nodded. "Rocks, debris, shipwrecks, some still have their crews inside." That last part made Ethan's stomach tighten. The silence of space was broken only by the low hum of the skiff's engines and the faint ping of the navigation scanner every so often. A sharp beep would warn of a collision path, and Kyra would make a quick, precise adjustment. Her hands never hesitated. her eyes scanning both the radar and the shifting walls of stone around them. Ethan watched her closely, noticing the small changes in her breathing through the bond. He could feel her concentration like a steady pulse in his own mind. "You've been here before," he said. She didn't look at him once. She replied. "I almost didn't leave." Ethan hesitated before asking, "Why come back?" Kyra's jaw tightened. "Because the map in your hands leads to the one place in this belt no one dares to go, the hollow star." Ethan frowned. "Sounds like a tourist trap." Her eyes flicked to him briefly. "It's a hidden base. Deep inside a hollowed asteroid, my clan used it as a vault for things too dangerous to destroy." Ethan glanced down at the metallic case. "So this opens it." Kyra gave a slow nod, and inside is something that could end the High Clan's rule. Ethan let out a slow breath. No pressure then. Before Kyra could respond, the scanner beeped sharply. She looked at the screen, her eyes narrowing. "Something's following us." Ethan checked the rear display. Faint signal was moving through the belt, shadowing their path. "Maybe it's just debris," he said. Kyra shook her head. "Debris doesn't match our speed." She angled the skiff into a narrow passage between two massive chunks of rock, their surfaces scarred from centuries of collisions. Ethan felt his heart rate climb, and he knew she felt it too. "They're still with us," she said, her voice low. A sudden flash lit the darkness. Plasma fire streaked past the skiff, narrowly missing their tail. "Guess that answers that," Ethan muttered. Kyra pushed the throttle, the skiff darting deeper into the belt. The pursuing ship was fast, weaving through the rocks with practiced skill. "They know this place," Kyra said sharply. She banked hard to avoid a spinning boulder, the skiff scraping so close that dust and fragments rattled against the hull. Ethan gripped the console. "Tell me you have a plan." Kyra's eyes flicked to the radar, then to the path ahead. "There's a narrow crack in the red spine," she said. "If we make it through, they won't follow." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" "Because the red spine eats ships," she replied without humor. The red spine loomed ahead, a jagged chain of asteroids connected by glowing streams of magnetic energy. Bolts of crimson lightning jumped between the rocks, lighting the belt. In eerie flashes, Kyra's tail flicked once, a signal Ethan had come to recognize as both focus and warning. She guided the skiff toward a gap barely wide enough for their wings. The pursuing ship fired again, the blast scorching the rock just meters from them. Ethan's breath caught as Kyra slipped the skiff into the gap. Inside, the space was tight, the walls lined with glowing minerals that pulsed like a living thing. Bolts of red energy danced across the walls, sometimes leaping dangerously close to the ship through the bond. Ethan could feel Kyra's steady control. It was the only thing keeping them from panicking together. Behind them, the pursuing ship reached the entrance to the gap, then pulled back sharply. "They're not following," Ethan said, relief in his voice. Kyra didn't relax. "They'll wait outside. We have to lose them completely." She guided the skiff through twisting channels, each one narrower than the last. Finally, they emerged into a cavernous space hidden deep within the belt. The walls glowed faintly from the minerals, casting the skiff in red light. Kyra cut the engines, letting them drift. "This is a safe pocket," she said. "We'll rest here for a moment." Ethan leaned back, still gripping the case. "So what happens when we reach this hollow star?" Kyra's gaze was steady. "We find what my clan fears most, hand. We decide if the galaxy is ready for it." Ethan swallowed, feeling the weight of her words settle heavily. Through the bond, he felt a flicker of something from her. Something that wasn't fear or anger, but trust. It was faint, but it was there, and for the first time, he realized just how much she was risking by bringing him here. Awakening something else. The safe pocket inside the shattered belt was quiet, too quiet. Ethan sat in the co-pilot seat, the metallic case resting on his knees. His eyes on the red glow of the cavern walls. Kyra stood near the control panel, her tail still and her armor faintly reflecting the light. Through the bond, Ethan could feel the tension coiling in her mind like a wound spring. She was listening, not with her ears, but with the instincts of a Vel'Ra warrior. Here, she said softly. Ethan straightened. Who's here? My clan, she replied, and they've brought the flagship. Before Ethan could respond, the cavern lit up with a blinding flash as the entrance filled with the shadow of something enormous. A massive warship slid into view, its black hull covered in crimson markings that glowed like embers. Dozens of smaller fighter craft poured from its launch bays, fanning out like predators in the hunt. They're blocking the only exit, Ethan said, his voice tight. Kira didn't answer, her eyes locked on the flagship's cresta, symbol of the Vel'Ra High clans. They won't leave without me, she said. And now? Without you, Ethan felt a rush of her emotions through the bondonger. Regret and a hard edge of determination. What do we do? He asked. Her gaze turned to him, sharp and steady. We finished the bonding, right? Ethan blinked. Now. In the middle of this. Her tail flicked once. It's the only way to survive, once the rite is complete. Our connection will be absolute, and that helps us how? He asked. She stepped closer, her voice low. It means we'll fight as one. My instincts will be yours. Your reflexes will be mine, and our strength will double. Ethan looked toward the flagship, then back at her. All right. What do I do? Kyra's hand rested on his chest, just over his heart. Trust me, she said. Her other hand reached behind her, taking her tail and wrapping it once around his wrist. The moment the furred surface touched his skin, the bond flared like fire in his mind. He gasped as images flashed through him, memories that weren't his. Battles fought on distant worlds. The feel of alien suns on his skin. The sound of Vel'Ra war drums. At the same time, he knew she was seeing flashes of his life-dusty repair docks. Quiet nights under Earth's stars. The laughter of old friends. The flood of sensations was overwhelming, but Kyra's voice cut through it. Steady and commanding. Breathe with me, she said. He did, matching her slow, deep rhythm until the chaos in his mind settled into something sharper. The bond solidified, a pulse of shared awareness flowing between them like a second heartbeat. Kyra stepped back, her eyes brighter now, glowing with a fierce light. It's done, she said. Outside, the fighters closed in, their weapons already charging. Kyra slid into the pilot's seat, and without a word, Ethan took the co-pilot's position. They didn't have to speak, he could already sense her plan forming. The skiff roared to life, shooting upward toward the blockade. The first volley of plasma fire came fast. But Kyra rolled the skiff between two streams of glowing energy. With impossible precision, Ethan's hands moved over the secondary controls without thinking, targeting the nearest fighter and sending a burst of fire into its wing. It spun out, crashing into an asteroid. More fighters swarmed them, but now every turn, every shot, every evasive maneuver felt effortless. Through the bond, Kyra's instincts flowed into him, guiding his movements like they had been training. Together for years, they weaved between asteroids. Using the belt's debris as cover, two fighters clipped rocks trying to follow their path. Exploding in brilliant flashes of light, the flagship's main cannons fired, the blasts shaking the belt and sending shockwaves through the rocks. Kyra didn't flinch, pulling the skiff into a sharp dive and skimming along the surface of a massive asteroid. Ethan saw an opening through the flagship's lower defenses and instantly knew without words that she intended to take it. They burst upward, the skiffs, guns blazing, tearing through one of the flagship's weapon ports. Alarms blared from the enemy ship, its formation breaking as fighters scrambled to protect it. Kyra's voice was calm but electric. One more pass. Ethan nodded. Already targeting another weak point, they spun through the chaos, blasting through another section of the flagship's armor. The great vessel shuddered, its engines dimming as it pulled back from the fight. The remaining fighters scattered. Retreating into the shadows of the belt, the space around them grew quiet again. Kyra eased the skiff into a slow glide, her hands finally relaxing on the controls. Ethan looked at her, still feeling the hum of their connection. "We actually won." Her gaze met his, a rare softness in her eyes. "No, human. We survived, and that is victory enough." For a moment, they sat in silence, the red glow of the belt surrounding them. Ethan finally asked, "So what now?" Kyra's tail curled slightly. "Now, we find the hollow star." Ethan smirked faintly. And after that, her smile was small, but it carried something dangerous and certain. After that, the galaxy changes. He leaned back, still, feeling the strange warmth of the bond in his chest, whatever lay ahead. He knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.